What's up guys, back again with another video in the Java series. This time we're going to look at how to use the new Java 14 switch expressions. So as of this recording, it's March 21st. 4 days ago, Java 14 just came out. We got a few new features like switch expressions. We got helpful null exceptions. We have pattern matching for instance of, what's it called? I forgot what it's called, but we can also do packaging for JavaFX applications, which we'll also be looking at because I have a JavaFX series. But we'll be looking at all these features. I'll probably make a video on all of them, so stay tuned for that. But like I said, this episode we're going to look at Java 14 switch expressions, which is pretty cool. And we all know what switch statements are. Hopefully you know that by now. If you don't know that, then watch my Java series before you look at this video. You need to know what a switch statement is before you learn a switch expression, because they're very similar, so you got to know how the first one works. But anyway, before we begin, since this is Java 14, you got to make sure that you have IntelliJ 2020, which is at this current moment of this recording, it's in early access. You can still download it, but you can't update your regular IntelliJ IDE to that version. You need to download it separately until it comes out. I think it comes out in April, so by the time you're watching this, it may already be out, so just be aware of that. You need at least IntelliJ IDEA 2020. But anyway, also go up here to project structure and make sure that you have the SDK 14, Java 14, not 13 and 12 or 11 or something like that. You need to have the latest one. And then also you need to set the project language level. So set that to 14 or preview, doesn't really matter, but set it to 14. And that's going to enable your IDE here to recognize what you're doing, so it won't complain since you're using a different syntax. So let's begin here. So what are the few features that we have that are added to switch expressions that are different from switch statements? The first thing obviously is in the name. It's a switch expression, not a statement. And we'll look at what that means in a second. Then also we don't need to break statements anymore, which is very good. That's also no fall through, meaning that if you don't have a break statement in a switch statement, you're going to fall through the other cases, and that code in the other cases will be executed. And so with switch expressions, that's all automatic. We don't need break statements, which is very convenient. And then we don't use a colon syntax anymore. We'll have an arrow syntax, sort of like a lambda expression, which we'll look at in a second. If you don't know what lambdas are, I just made a lambda video in detail, so make sure you watch that. And then also we have multiple cases per line, which is very convenient. In switch expressions, you would have to have cases, different cases on different lines, but this time we can have it all in one line, which is very concise, very convenient. And then finally, instead of the break statement or the keyword, we have the yield keyword, which is a new keyword unique to switch expressions, which we'll look at in detail. So let's get started here. First I'm going to show you a simple use case for a switch statement, and then we'll look at how we can improve upon that switch statement by switching it to a switch expression. So we'll do that by making a enumeration here, or enumerator, whichever one it is. So enum, we'll call this vehicle type, and this will have a few vehicles like car, truck, train, plane, and then motorcycle. So these are all just our enumerations here. And then now we can go down here, make a type of that enumerator. So vehicle type, vehicle 1 is equal to, and we'll do vehicle type dot, let's do motorcycle. And then now we can make a switch statement. Keep in mind it's a switch statement, not a switch expression, to test those values. So we'll pass in vehicle 1, and then we'll make some cases for that. So it can be a car, and automatically you can see that it's putting an arrow here, which is, this is basically just IntelliJ assuming that you want to use a switch expression, not a switch statement. But we're going to use the switch statement first, so we'll just put a colon here like normal. And then after that, you put the code for your statement. So we'll just say something, doesn't really matter what you put, just say vroom vroom, it's a car. There we go. And then of course, don't forget that you need to break, or else you'll fall through the other cases and execute the code for the other cases below it. And there we go. So we got all of our cases here. They all say something unique whenever the case is matching the type here. And then after that, you obviously just break. And yeah, that should be good, pretty simple. Accidentally just click something, oops. But yeah, let's try running this now and see how it looks into the console. It should print out, if this works correctly, it should print out the bottom one here. It's a motorcycle, good. Well, let's change it to train to make sure there's no fall through or anything like that. And we should get true, it's a train. and boom, we get true it's a train. Perfect. So let's look at how we can convert this to a switch expression. So like I said in the third one here, it says we move on to an arrow syntax rather than a colon syntax. And what I mean by colon syntax is here you put a colon, and then after the colon you put all of the lines of code for your switch statement. So with an arrow syntax, we move on to an arrow, obviously. So let me show you how that works. So let's just make another vehicle type here. So vehicle, actually no, we can just edit the one we have. So to convert this into an arrow syntax, all we got to do is remove the colon and then put an arrow. But the only thing is different here, you don't need a break statement, which is very convenient. So you can remove all the break statements. That's very convenient. If Java is smart enough not to make you use break statements, then that's very convenient for us as the programmer. And then if it's multiple lines, you can have a block of code. So we'll just cut this and then paste it in here, and then we'll do that for all of these. Convert this to an arrow, put the statement, cut this one, convert this to an arrow, put the statement. Let me zoom in a little bit, and then this one, cut it, convert it to an arrow, paste it, and then finally we got car here, convert this to an arrow and paste it. There we go. So that already is how you make a switch statement. That's how you denote it. That's how Java knows that you're using a switch statement rather than a switch expression. I mean a switch expression rather than a switch statement, by using the arrow instead of the colon. But something that you need to notice here is that since we're only using one line for each case, we can shorten this by making it a single line case, just by removing the block here, the code block, and putting it on one line. So that's very convenient. Also makes it much more concise, saves some space. So we can do that for all of these. As long as it's one line, it can fit on one line or whatever. So that's very nice. So let's do that. And there we go. So it looks great now. It should work the same way, so we should still get true it's a train, even without the break statements or anything like that. And we get true it's a train. So already you can see why switch expressions are much better than switch statements. They're much more concise. They don't need break statements. It's just cutting down on the bullcrap and then having the same amount of functionality. So obviously this is called a switch expression, not a switch statement, so there has to be some difference rather than just the arrow syntax. So what makes this an expression? So I don't have the technical definition of what an expression is, but you can just break it down and say an expression is a piece of code that returns a value from itself. And you can think of it as a math expression in Java. So 2 plus 2 is an expression because this right here, this little statement here, returns the value of 4. So then we can use an example here. So let's say we have an integer result, and then we do is equal to 2 plus 2. So 2 plus 2 again is the expression, but we know that equals 4, so then we could store 4 into this this variable here, so that's very convenient. So a method, I guess, I don't know if a method counts as an expression per se, but you can use a method. It might, but yeah, you get the point, right? So it's just something that returns a value. I guess you could put it simply. Like I said, I don't know the technical definition, but that's how we can use it with a switch expression. So let me show you an example of a use case in which we might want to use a switch expression instead of a switch statement. So let's say we have a string here, string day of the week, and that's going to be equal to Wednesday. And then we have an integer result. And our goal here is going to be to convert this day of the week here, whatever is stored inside this variable here, into the corresponding number. So for example, Monday would be 1, Wednesday would be 3, and Sunday would be 7. So just the corresponding day of the week, right? As a number. So we can do that pretty easily. So let's use a switch statement, not a switch expression, just to first show you. So day of the week, and then we'll add some cases for this. So case Monday, and when it's case Monday, we need to set result equal, not return, set result equal to 1, because 1 is for Monday. And then don't forget your break. So then we got case Tuesday, result is equal to 2, and then you break again. And there we have all of our cases here. So we got Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, 1 through 7, very convenient. And then now, once that is over, we can print this out just to see what the value is. We'll say the day of the week as a number, if I can type, is result, just like that. So if we look down here, we can see that the IDE is complaining. It says variable results might not have been initialized. So if we look up here, we can see that it is indeed not initialized by default. So this is a problem because if we don't initialize it, if none of these cases are matched, let's say that we use something like this, none of these cases have this value here, so it won't match for any of these, right? So result will never be initialized to something. So one way we can fix this is by adding a default. So if none of those above cases are executed, we can have a default and then do result is equal to 0 or something like that and then break. Or we can do result is equal to 0 from the outset and then just remove this if you want to. There's a number of ways you can do it, but we'll just use the default method for now and just leave this uninitialized up here. But the reason it's complaining whenever you leave it uninitialized is because you're trying to print out the value, but if there's nothing in the value, there's nothing to print out, so that would probably return a null exception or something like that. So that's something you obviously want to avoid, so initializing it is crucial. But anyway, let's look at how we can improve this. Already we can see that if we were to convert this to a switch expression, we would be able to get rid of all the break statements here. We would be able to put this all in one line. But also look at what we have here. We have an immutable variable, immutable. I think I spelled that correctly. And what this means is that you just have a variable that is not final. It can be changed at any point, and it's actually good practice to avoid making these when you don't have to make them. But we'll look at that in a second. So first, let's convert this switch statement into a switch expression like we did above. So we can get rid of all the breaks here, and then just move this onto arrow syntax and then put it on one line. Same thing with all of these other ones, all on one line. So that's very convenient. Alright, so I've converted all of these into the arrow syntax. They're already you can see that this is much more concise than what we had a second ago. It's all on one line, easier to read as the programmer. It gets straight to the point. So there's some further improvements that we can make upon this switch expression here. So like I said, in its expression, so the switch expression itself is capable of returning a value. So what I mean by that is that we can actually just shorten this and do arrow 1, arrow 2, arrow 3, arrow 4, arrow 5, arrow 6, arrow 7, and then arrow 0. So what this will mean is basically if any of these cases are, if they are true, then this will be returned. Whatever is on the right side of the arrow is the value that's going to be returned from this switch expression here. But of course, we're not setting this expression equal to anything, so it's just not going to be, there's no point in doing this. There's no point in returning a value if this is not going to be equal to anything. So we can just cut this and do is equal to, and set the expression equal to the result variable. So now the result of this expression here is going to be set into our result variable, so we have it stored, which is pretty convenient. And then we can furthermore make this final, so it won't be immutable anymore. So now we can see even more so that it's making our code much more concise by just putting it all in one line instead of having to worry about this variable. And then, it's just very nice. So now let's get rid of this and change it back to Wednesday so we can verify that this whole thing works. So let's make this go down here. We'll say the day of the week is the number. Okay, that's good. So now let's run this here, and we should get 3 into the console. And yeah, we do. We get the day of the week as a number is 3. Perfect. That works exactly how we wanted it to work. So like I said, you can make this final if you want to, so it's not immutable anymore. Or you can actually, a better example of how you might use this is actually just to put this switch statement into a method. So let me show you how we can improve upon methods too. So if we make a method up here, we'll call it public static find number from day or something like that. And we'll just pass in the string of the day of the week. And we'll need to return a value, so return integer for the number of the day. And then we'll just copy this switch expression here and then go down here and we can paste it, right? So this should return a value depending on what day of the week is, but we still need to return that value. So you could just do return value and then we need to initialize value. So we could do integer value is equal to the result of this switch expression here. But since this switch expression actually returns a value itself, we can actually just cut this and do return just like that. So we're cutting this down even more to make it more concise, and that's very convenient. That's why switch expressions are the way they are. You can just return them directly. So that's very nice. And so then we can use this method by going down here, and we can get rid of all of this, and we'll do find number from day, and then we'll say Thursday, and that should do the same thing. So if we run this now, we should get what is Thursday? 4? Yeah, 4. So yeah, we get the day of the week as a number is 4, exactly what we wanted and what we expected. So there's another thing I want to show you. Don't forget that with a math expression, we can do 2 plus 2, or even if we have a method here like a method, let's just make up a method that returns a number. So method that returns, if I can type, number. At any point, we can actually just add any other number to this method. Since this is going to return an integer, we can then just add another integer on it as if this was an integer, because technically it is. If it returns an integer, you can actually just think of this method call as an integer itself in a way. So then we could just add numbers to it, we can minus numbers from it or subtract numbers from it, we could multiply, we can do literally anything, we can manipulate it in any way. But the thing about this is that you can do the exact same thing with this switch expression. If for some reason I wanted to do 234, if for some reason I wanted to add that value onto our switch expression, we can do that. Since you can think of this as an integer itself, since all of these values here return integers, we can think of this as an integer in which we can add values to, which is pretty cool, or minus values or whatever, however you want to manipulate it. And also don't forget that, I didn't tell you this, but don't forget that you need a semicolon on the end of a switch expression, since it is a switch expression, so that you know that is the end of the expression. So there's one more thing I want to show you here is the yield keyword, or actually there's two more things, but first is the yield keyword. And let me just copy this down back to here so we can work with it a little more. So we have switch day of the week, and we'll say integer result is equal to switch day of the week. And we need a variable for the day of the week, so string day of the week is equal to, we'll do Tuesday. So let's say, well, currently what we're doing here is we're returning a value depending on what the case is, which is pretty cool. But what if for some reason you wanted to not only return a value, but execute some other code, like an output statement or something like that? It doesn't matter what the code is, but the point is you want to not only return something, but execute code. So since there's going to be multiple lines of code, you need to turn this into a block. So just like that. And you don't actually have to do it for all of these, only for the ones that you want to do multiple lines of code and not only return something for. So let's say instead of just case Monday, we want to do output Mondays suck, and then we want to return the value of 1. So how would we return the value of 1 since it's not a one-line arrow anymore, right? So we can't just do return 1, we actually have to do yield 1. So what does yield do? Yield is the same thing as a break statement, except that it not only breaks from this point on, but it also returns a value as it's breaking. So if I was to have another output statement behind this, this does not execute, since this is the equivalent of a break statement, but it also returns a value. So this is just a break statement on steroids, you could say, since it also returns a value. So IntelliJ is actually smart enough to know that this is an unreachable statement because you're yielding here. This, anything after this yield is breaking out of the loop, or the, not the loop, but the case here. So this will not be executed, anything after, okay? So just don't forget that. And then we can do that for any of these other ones, like I said, if we want to not only return something but also output something or do any other piece of code. And there we go. So we got it all set up. We have an output statement for each of these, and they're all yielding different values for the different days of the week, which is pretty cool. And it doesn't have to be one line; it can be any line of any number of pieces of code here, obviously. But just don't forget that you need to yield once you're done. But also, what if you don't want to return a value inside of your switch statement here, or switch expression? What if you only want to execute a piece of code like we were doing up here? You can actually just remove the yield, no problem. There's no problem with that. But of course, it's going to complain since it needs to have a value for this case, since you're setting this switch expression equal to this variable here. So just to reiterate on what that means is that you can actually just keep it as a statement basically where it doesn't return a value. It's still a switch expression obviously because you're using the arrow syntax, but if you just want to execute code rather than return code, you can of course you can choose not to yield. Just make sure that you're not setting it equal to a variable, of course, because the switch expression will be unable to yield any values. Anyway, so that's pretty cool. So let's run this now. So it should print out Tuesdays suck but aren't as bad, and then it should yield the value of 2. So down here, let's put let's copy this and then put it down here. Then let's change it to what is the variable? It's called result. So let's change this to result. So we should get 2 along with the other statement here. And there we go. So it says the day of the week as a number is 2, but above that says Tuesdays suck but aren't as bad. So that proves that it's able to execute both of these. And then of course, don't forget that anything after the yield does not execute because it's equal to a break basically, but it's a break that returns a value. And I left the default as just one line, by the way. Doesn't really matter. You can do it however you want to. So the last thing I want to show you for switch expressions is what if you want to use multiple cases per line. So for example here, Mondays and Tuesdays both suck. They say they both suck. So what if we just want to group a Tuesday onto the same case as a Monday? We can actually just do that if we want to. So let's just get rid of this here, and then we'll change this to a comma, and then Tuesday, just like that. So all that means is that now, if the case is Monday or Tuesday, that means that it'll execute the chunk of code inside of the arrow here, or the block here. And then let's change this to something more fitting. Since we have two cases that fit into one now, we'll say these suck. And then also keep in mind you're still yielding a single value. So the only downside of this is that we're going to be yielding 1 even though it's Monday and Tuesday. But this will make sense for some situations, so yeah, that's okay. So now we can group some of these other ones here. So for the weekend, these are both the weekend. So we can cut this out and then change this to Saturday and Sunday. So if the cases are matching Saturday or Sunday, it'll run this chunk of code here. And then we can leave this how it is, pretty cool. Actually, we'll change it to it's the weekend, baby. And yeah, so this should do the same exact thing that the previous one was doing, except that the cases are grouped into single cases for the different labels or whatever you would call them. So now let's run this and see if it prints out Tuesday still. And yeah, it says these suck, and then it says the day of the week as a number is 1, and it's saying 1 instead of 2, of course, just because we're yielding 1. We could change this to 2. I mean, there's no problem with that. So that's pretty cool. So that's how you group different cases together in case you want to do that to make it more concise. And yeah, that's pretty much actually it for switch expressions, all I wanted to show you. At the end of the day, switch expressions are much better because they're much more concise. You can fit them onto one line easily with arrows that look very nice. And then you can also use them as expressions, which is another very crucial thing, so that you don't have to create all these variables and then worry about setting the variables. And then you can fit it all into one line and make it much more concise. So it's all about really just writing less code and making your code more efficient, all the while maintaining the value of the code without destroying the features that the switch statement already had, basically. So that's all pretty awesome. So hopefully you can switch over to this new syntax and make your code even more awesome. So yeah, so hopefully you enjoyed this episode. If there's any questions you have about switch expressions, you can ask in the comment section below, or I would rather that you join our Discord server. We have a big Discord community with about probably 800 to 900 members. So you can join here, ask for programming help in any of these channels here. You can also join general and you know, get some friends if you don't have any. Or we also have a suggestion channel where sometimes I'll make a video if you leave a good suggestion. So that's pretty cool. So yeah, make sure you join this. The link for this will be in the description below. And then also don't forget, all of the code for this episode will be in the description below in a link to my website. The website's currently crappy because I'm working on it. But yeah, it's there. It has a large amount of commenting. So if you look here, there's lots of comments next to the code. So in case you forget a concept, you don't have to rewatch the video. Although that would give me some nice views. But yeah, so you can make sure you check this out in the description below. Maybe bookmark it if you need to, in case you forget. But yeah, that's about it. Hopefully you can show this off to your friends. Show them that you know the new features of Java 14. And stay tuned for the new Java 14 features that I'll be releasing in the future. So that's about it. So if you like this video, leave a like. If you want to see more, subscribe. And peace.